Hello, everyone. This is Michael Gold. I'm a research professor and the associate director in the University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry. And this is a second talk on growing Chinese chestnuts. First part of it, which is already uploaded on the Mizzou Agroforestry YouTube channel, was recorded last year for the chestnut roast of 2020. And now we're going to fill in a few gaps from last time. So what I want to do in this recording is just in an outline form, mention what I covered in the first Chinese chestnut video. And then in this video, I want to talk about the major commercial species of chestnut, talk a little bit about world chestnut production and the amount that comes into the United States as imports. Just tell you why we don't use American chestnut for nut production or chinkapin chestnut for that matter. Spend a bit more time on financial decision support tools and a little more time on marketing consumer research. One slide with my favorite chestnut recipe for chestnut hummus. And also just mention that we do have a very wonderful professional association, the Chestnut Growers of America. And if you're going to get into chestnut production, I recommend that you join it. So what did we cover in the first video? We covered why we have a Missouri Midwest chestnut industry and the things that are building the industry and what we know so far. The Center for Agroforestry's comprehensive approach to chestnut development. We covered a lot of production aspects, site, soils, establishment, management, diseases, pests, harvest, and post-harvest. Gave you an example of chestnut alley cropping and had a quick look at a financial decision support tool and a little bit about markets. And then some nice slides about what do you do with chestnuts and all the different options. So that was all in part one. Just to remind you that what we're trying to do is build a perennial specialty crop chestnut industry in Missouri and also throughout the Midwest. So it's important that we get yeses to these questions. Can we grow them? Yes, we can. Are the yields good? Yes, they are. Are there markets? Absolutely. And our price is good? Yes, they are. So when you get those 4 yeses, that's pretty much a green light that things should move forward. So what do I want to cover in this second video? Again, major commercial species, world chestnut production, U.S. chestnut imports and trends as of 2020, why we don't grow American chestnut or chinkapin chestnut for nuts, more on the financiers and decision support tool, more details with 3 different tools, market and consumer research findings and some fast facts, my chestnut hummus recipe, literally, I'm going to just show you the recipe, and then again, the Chestnut Growers of America. So there are 3 major commercial chestnut species of the genus Castanea. One is, you can see in the center, Castanea sativa. That's the European chestnut. Castanea crenata, that's the Japanese chestnut. And what we grow especially well here in the eastern United States is Castanea mollissima, or the Chinese chestnut. You can also see the Castanea dentata American chestnut and a couple of the chinkapins chestnuts, and there are chinkapin chestnuts also in Asia. So world chestnut production, it's a big industry outside the United States. Average annual world production is about 1 billion pounds. Asia accounts for roughly 2/3 of that production. China's first, Korea's second, also some in Japan. Europe accounts for about 30% of world production, with Italy 3rd overall, Turkey 4th overall. But in terms of imports to the United States, Italy is by far the major exporter to the United States. And the rest of the world produces less than 5% of world chestnut production, and the US produces less than 1%, under 2 million pounds. So let's take a look at some US chestnut imports last year in 2020. The import value of chestnuts coming into the US was somewhat under $12 million, about 11.5 million. And the volume was about 6 million pounds. The average commodity price of those imports was about $1.90 a pound. The top chestnut imports, as I say, Italy by far 71% of the market and the value about $8.25 million. South Korea 11%, China 10%, Portugal 7%, and then Chile has a very tiny amount, $156,000, but the production is rapidly increasing, as you'll see. In terms of import trends over the past 5 years, the imports are trending down, and I believe that's because American consumers, as I will show you later, have a strong preference to buy American, and not only to buy American, to buy local. So you can see that the 5-year growth in import value globally is down 20%. Italy is holding its own. South Korea is down 40%. China is down 55%. Portugal is down 13%. Chile's got a massive increase in production, but overall, it's a tiny little 1.3% in the United States. So not that relevant at this point in time. So why don't we grow American chestnut? American chestnut, as you can see, this is the original natural range. There used to be somewhere between 2 and 4 billion American chestnuts that produced just gigantic amounts of chestnuts that used to be shipped up on rail cars into the major cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, etc. But when the blight came in around 1900, it wiped out within 40 years, literally all of the standing American chestnuts. And the blight is a fungus that ultimately girdles the stem. And the blight does not survive below ground. There's something in the soil that kills the blight. So that enables the trees to continue to smolder and to resprout and to grow a short stem. And then it gets the fungus and it dies back to below the ground and it shoots up. So there are American chestnuts that have been sending up these sprout clumps now for 100 years. So we don't have a chestnut industry here because of chestnut blight on American chestnut. In addition, if we did have living chestnut trees, it still wouldn't be the main part of the industry. The nuts are much, much smaller, 40 to 50 per pound, but they do have a delicious sweet flavor. But this is a tall forest-grown timber tree, and there's really no way to manage for quality nuts in a 150-foot tall tree. But it is just a fabulous timber tree and a fabulous wildlife tree. And so you can ask the question, will the American chestnut be restored? And the answer is yes, it will. Be patient, whether it's through inserting a gene for resistance to blight or back cross breeding from the American Chestnut Foundation, the American chestnut will indeed come back. That's what it looked like once upon a time. This is a picture out of the National Geographic. You can see the size of the tree and you can see the size of the person. This was called the redwood of the East. These were huge, massive, tall, beautiful trees. So what about the American chinkapin? Chinkapin, there's two species. Some people argue there's one and a subspecies. There's the Allegheny chinkapin, which is over here. And then there's the Ozark chinkapin, which you find in the Ozark region. Problems with the chinkapin are multiple. One, you can see the size of a chinkapin nut compared to an American chestnut compared to what we use commercially, which is a Chinese chestnut. So there's 250 chinkapins per pound. So there's no way to harvest them. They are sweet, but they're not commercially viable. They're great for wildlife. They also get blight, unfortunately. So we've lost a lot of our American chinkapin, and there are efforts. Our center is involved in some efforts to restore chinkapin. And in fact, since we've been doing some scouting in southern Missouri, we found that there are, in fact, still many Ozark chinkapin remnant species, sprouts, etc., found in southern Missouri. So it isn't extinct, but it needs help for restoration. A quick review of chestnut financials. So here in Missouri, we tend to grow grafted cultivars under trickle irrigation, and in a well-managed orchard under good soils, yields should exceed 2,000 pounds an acre by the time the trees are 12 years old. Overall, in the industry, wholesale prices are strong, ranging from 2.5 to 5.25 per pound. Retail prices are strong, anywhere from 2.5 to upwards of $10 a pound. So the gross profit wholesale can be $5,000 or more an acre, and the gross profit, if you sell direct to the consumer, could be $10,000 an acre if you sell for $5 a pound or more. So let me talk about financial decision support tools. There are different tools developed by Larry Godsey. Dr. Godsey was a former economist here in our center, and he developed a black walnut tool, an elderberry tool, and a chestnut decision support tool. So I'm going to go through three different versions, the one developed by Larry Godsey here for the center, and then one by Michigan State, and one developed up at Madison, Wisconsin. So the purpose of these tools is to help farmers with financial decisions so that lowers their risk. Now, if you look at this particular screenshot, you can see that there are establishment decisions, there are management decisions, there are harvesting decisions and marketing decisions, and then you get some financial results. And so what do these tools do? They tell you how much will it cost to produce, how much will I earn, and how long until I make a profit. That's the essence of what these tools are going to do for you. Down at the bottom of these are all spreadsheets. There are a whole bunch of tabs. So what we're looking at now on our tool is the management input tab. We'll also take a quick look at the cost budget tab, but there are other tabs you can explore. And on the input tables, there's a number of variables you can actually modify to fit your specific situation. So we're just looking at one corner of that opening screen, and I blew it up. And these are the establishment decisions. And each one of these establishment decisions, like site preparation, spacing, layout and design, site quality, planting stock, whether you use seedlings, seed, grafted seedlings, how you fertilize, how you stake the trees if you do, and do you irrigate. And every one of these is a drop-down menu, as I've shown right here. For example, with herbicide for site prep, you can herbicide and disc, or you can user define what kind of site prep you do if you just want to mulch or whatever you do, grow a cover crop, etc. On management decisions, again, these are all drop-down menus. How often are you going to thin based on how far you're going to space them apart? A lot of people these days are planting chestnuts at 20 by 20 foot spacing, which absolutely will require thinning, but people are hoping to recoup more profit in the early years and then thin ultimately perhaps to 40 by 40. There's a drop down for fertilization, for pruning, for weed control, for pest control, for disease control, and I've opened up the deer control. You know, what are you going to do to keep the deer away? You're going to put a fence around your whole property. You're going to use tree tubes. You're going to cage each tree, etc. These are all options. In terms of harvest decisions, how are you going to pick them up? With your hands, with a nut wizard, with a FACMA mechanical harvester like I reviewed in the first video. That's a commercial pull behind tractor model, but there's also one that's a self-propelled model. So you can user define that. And so there are harvest options. And then also there are decisions related to marketing. So what return do you hope to get, expected rate of return, and what price do you hope to get per pound, and how many acres are you going to plant in your orchard? And you can input these variables. And after you do all that and all those different elements of the decision support tool, you get financial results. So based on the information entered in the model, this chestnut orchard has the following financial performance over 70 years. And it's both by acre, and also in this case, we just selected 8 acres. So what's the present value of revenues per acre at 5% rate of return, present value of cost per acre, net present value, the modified internal rate of return, years to break even, and annual equivalent value. And those are all given to you as financial information. If you look down at the bottom again on the tabs and we shift over to the cost budgets, when you input all the different things that are options in the spreadsheet, you basically get a cost per acre, a cost per tree, and you can use this to go into a bank and apply for a loan because it shows that you've done your homework and you know what all your costs are, and also you're going to know what your projected revenues are. Again, there's a financial analysis tab. There's an input table tab where you can modify a lot of these different variables to your own extent, and then different chemicals. And then it shows you what the growth models are that these calculations are based on over the years. Now I'm shifting to Michigan State, which has some beautiful chestnut resources. Now Michigan, a state of Michigan, is a major horticulture state, and they've developed a comprehensive set of resources for chestnut. Michigan has a very strong chestnut co-op, and the focus of Michigan's industry is not Chinese chestnut like out here in Missouri, but they're using what I call a West Coast cultivar or a Mediterranean cultivar, Colossal, which is a European-Japanese hybrid that is male sterile and requires a pollinator or pollinizer tree to produce pollen. And then I've just given you 3 different links to content that they provide at Michigan State, the financial decision support tool, other information related to management. It's a very comprehensive and excellent site. So if you look at a little more about Michigan State's chestnut decision support tool, their support tool provides an economic analysis of the potential for chestnut compared to tart cherry, and Michigan's a big tart cherry state. So the idea was to develop an economic decision support tool for individual growers to compare benefits of chestnut orchards versus crops like cherries and apples, and also used to compare different chestnut growing systems. So it's got good information, it's got good instructions, analysis and interpretation. Again, there's a whole bunch of different tabs at the bottom that you can look at, and we'll look at a couple. So one of those tabs shows chestnut establishing costs year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it has a whole bunch of things that you need to consider that are all helpful when you're thinking about establishing and maintaining chestnuts in the early years. Another part of that tool, another tab, is chestnut orchard cost per acre. So it has information on time, on labor, on material, on equipment, herbicides, fertilizers, the use of a pickup, harvesting, and a whole bunch of other factors. So this is a very comprehensive way to look at all the costs that go in. Another way to look at this is the annual or hourly equipment costs for the chestnut orchard. The top one shows annual equipment costs. Bottom one is hourly equipment costs and includes tractors, that harvester, sprayers, orchard sprayer for weeds, for mowing. This says rotary mower. We use a flail mower here at the University of Missouri. And other miscellaneous kinds of tools that you need for chestnuts. Third tool that will be forthcoming in the not too distant future is called a fruit and nut compass. There's a whole series of these compasses that have been developed by the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And the developer of this tool is John Hendrickson, and I've listed his contact information. And the fruit and nut compass, again, a financial planning tool for perennial crop farmers. And it has 12 different steps that you can read through. Timeline, acreage, land prep, planting, establishment, harvest, equipment and infrastructure, expenses, overhead, assets, market costs, projected sales, and so on. So the other thing we want to do in a little more depth this time, but not too much, is to talk about markets and consumers. So why look at markets? Well, risk-averse producers are understandably reluctant to undertake a new enterprise like chestnuts unless there's readily available market information. So market knowledge is a key ingredient in the success of profitable enterprises that produce commercially valuable products. So you have to have a marketing strategy. You have to identify buyers and their needs, the consumer, the broker, the wholesaler, the retailer. You want to research the competition, how they market, know if the market is flooded, what the market trends are there niches that have not been tapped, explore the industry and the standards, the influences and the trends, and then if it's appropriate, add value to the product. So let's look at some market data that the center developed in the fall of 2020, not 1920. On-farm sales and online direct-to-consumer were the dominant two market outlets in the fall of 2020, with reasonable amounts to grocery stores, co-ops, and wholesalers. And prices are good, $4 to $8 a pound on farm, $4.25 up to $10 a pound online. The co-op did $2.50 to $3.50 a pound. Groceries $3 to $6 a pound. Wholesalers $2.50 to $5.25 a pound. So prices are good, and these others are, were at least for during COVID, were quite minor. A few fast facts about the chestnut market. You need to know that grocers, growers, and the public have to be educated about post-harvest storage. Chestnuts need to be refrigerated. I call that the cold chain. So as soon as chestnuts hit the ground, they need to be picked up and immediately put into refrigeration. And then they need to be kept in refrigeration basically until the consumer is ready to eat them. Otherwise, the nuts will get moldy. So you need to provide information about chestnut nutrition. You need to provide like a 4-fold brochure at the point of sale that has recipes, nutrition information, how to process, open a chestnut, cook with a chestnut, etc. These are all things that are needed. Fast facts about the chestnut market. Well, freshness affects quality, appearance, and taste. So these are quality, fresh, firm chestnuts. If you can dent a chestnut, it's dried out, you don't want to buy it. And if it's dirty and funky, you don't want to buy it. If you're going to sell chestnuts, they need to look like that to the consumer. Okay. A few more fast facts about the market. We know from our work here in the center that American consumers like the taste of chestnuts, but 2/3 of them have never eaten a chestnut. So exposure makes a huge difference. We've been hosting an annual chestnut roast as a field day out at the Horticulture and Agroforestry Research Center since 2003. And we know from our survey work that 83% of our first-time visitors have never or rarely eaten a chestnut, whereas 1/3 of repeat chestnut visitors eat chestnuts at least once a year. 15% of our repeat visitors eat chestnuts 2 or 3 times a year, and 15% of our repeat visitors eat chestnuts more than 3 times a year. So we're developing consumer taste. We have chefs come in and do market demonstrations. This happens to be this is a cooking demonstration of chestnuts, and a whole bunch of folks learning all the different dishes you can make with chestnuts. And this is also fresh roasted chestnuts at the farmer's market, exposing the consumer to chestnuts. Another fast fact about the chestnut market that's really important, and that is that buy local matters. Consumers heavily prefer to buy locally grown chestnuts compared to chestnuts from abroad by 10 or 20-fold. And they even prefer compared to chestnuts not grown from your own state. So every state is now promoting buy Missouri, buy Iowa, buy Oregon, buy Florida, whatever. And the residents of that state tend to be loyal, and they're always looking for local regional producers where they could actually meet them at the farmer's market or go visit their orchard. So trust has a big factor in this whole equation. Okay, just about wrapping up here. One of my favorite recipes, and one that I make every year, is instead of a typical hummus made out of chickpeas or garbanzo beans, this is a chestnut parsnip hummus developed by the University of Missouri executive chef named Eric Cartwright. And it includes chestnuts and parsnips as the main ingredient. And then it has typical hummus ingredients: garlic, lemon juice, butter, olive oil. The one kicker in this is that we add some cumin, and then you add some tahini, salt, pepper, and parsley, and the recipe is right there. So it's delicious. I make it every fall. I hand out fresh chestnut hummus at our chestnut roast as a value-added product, and people tend to really, really like chestnut hummus. Okay, wrapping up. If you're serious about getting into chestnut production, or you're starting to get into chestnut production, you should, if you don't already, join the professional association that exists to support the growers, and that's the Chestnut Growers of America. They produce a quarterly newsletter. They have an annual meeting and a lot of very friendly people. The Chestnut Growers of America meeting next year is June 12th to 14th, and I think it's going to be out at Penn State University. That's the plan at any rate. So this is the same information, the way we ended the Growing Chestnuts Part 1. And so information about the Horticulture and Agroforestry Research Center, where we have a lot of our chestnut research and we have a lot of our demonstrations and our chestnut roast, a lot of information about the Center for Agroforestry, our website, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We also have a podcast, and we have a YouTube channel. So thanks for listening.